Here's what we need to remember. Neither a Raptor nor a fully operational F-23 will carry 8 air-to-air missiles internally. That's an Air Force requirement. In addition, operational jets are essentially identical when it comes to avionics. Both competitors have proposed a similar avionics suite. In fact, the Raptor ended up getting the radar originally proposed for the YF-23. In 1991, Lockheed won the Advanced Tactical Fighter (ATF) competition and went on to develop the stealthy world-beating F-22 Raptor air superiority fighter. At the time, Northrop was in the doghouse with the Pentagon and the U.S. Congress because of massive cost overruns on the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber and several other projects. Meanwhile, partner McDonnell Douglas wasn't faring much better. He has no idea how the Air Force decides which contractor to build the ATF, but he can only assume that there is a long overdue consideration of Northrop's poor track record of test fraud, suspension of contracts and fines. But what would an operational F-23 have looked like? And what if General Electric's revolutionary variable cycle YF-120 had carried the day? Even in 1991, in terms of raw performance, the General Electric-powered YF-23 was acknowledged to have been the best performer even compared to its Pratt & Whitney YF-119 powered twin. The YF-23 had much better supersonic cruise performance, stealth, and was only slightly less maneuverable at extremely low airspeeds. Interestingly, the YF-22 and YF-23 had exactly the same trimmed AOA of 60 degrees. The YF-23 could do it without thrust vectoring. Those V-tails were very powerful, especially when coupled to an unstable airframe. The YF-22 probably had an advantage at very low airspeeds, but neither company had enough time to investigate dynamic low-speed, high AOA maneuvering. This was a good example of how a competition needs to consider the PR value of flight test events. Lockheed understood this and did high AOA and shot missiles and pulled 9 gigaseconds. All single-point, benign condition events, but they left an impression. In some ways, this might cost Northrop the competition for the Advanced Tactical Fighter, unless other factors were involved in the selection. The ACC, Air Combat Command. Pilots were lured by dogfighting, and Lockheed provided a good visual demonstration of high AOA, albeit very limited and harmless tests. Northrop chose not to do high AOA during Dem Val, and that was a mistake. The two planes can perform the exact same maneuvers, pruning, high AOA. Having said that, the YF-22 looked better, because they did something visually appealing and Northrop couldn't, or so he concluded. But what would all of that have meant for an operational aircraft? In either case, the U.S. Air Force would have received an outstanding air superiority fighter that has no equal. But while the Lockheed Martin F-22 is bar none the best air superiority fighter the United States has ever produced, an operational F-23 might have offered an even greater performance margin over potential adversaries than the Raptor currently does. The final operational version of the F-23 would have offered much better range than the Raptor, especially at supersonic speeds, especially if powered by the YF-120. That would have come in handy over the Pacific. It would also have been stealthier, and it would have been almost as maneuverable as the Raptor, or possibly more so at different speeds and altitudes. Both the Raptor and a fully operational F-23 would have carried 8 air-to-air missiles internally. That was the Air Force requirement. Moreover, the operational jets were essentially identically in terms of avionics. Both competitors had proposed similar avionics suites. In fact, the Raptor ended up with the radar that was originally proposed for the YF-23. Ultimately, the Air Force ended up with an excellent plane with the Raptor. But both the YF-22 and YF-23 were outstanding designs. Had Northrop won the competition, the F-23 might have been a better overall performer, but it would have likely been more expensive. With the F-23, the Air Force would have a greater margin of superiority over potential threats like the Chinese J-20 or the Russian Pak-FA. But would that have been worth the price differential? Hard to say, but one can only imagine.